turned dark. And so we were just going to sit on the road all night so we could make the assault on her assignment early morning. Okay, we're here, and the Germans are in this pocket over here, and there's another road over here parallel to it. We lay there all night, very close to where the Germans were, but they didn't detect our presence. This outfit over here smoked cigarettes. They flashed lights. We could tell, you know, and yelling at each other, and it was kind of pretty soon. The Germans got their guns all set up, and they're shooting from about a mile or two away over us, another mile over to this road. And we could hear blam. And it was just very quickly, it got so bad, they had to leave, drove back into Coldmore. Before we attack a town, we always like to have the artillery soften it up a bit, send some shells in there. So we called for artillery support. It took a long time to get them to respond. So finally, they said, okay, you get one fire mission. Blam. 5 shells hit in that empty space out there. So we radioed back and said, you missed the town entirely. Shift to the left a little bit. And some general got on the phone. He said, there's hardly anything in that town. Attack and attack now. Well, that didn't leave us any option, you know. There's one other little incident that occurred while we're doing this. Oh, this is bare here, and the road that we went across is bare. Off over here was a forested area, and the train track went through this forested area. It turned out that Germans were in this area and pursued. Next thing you know, we're getting fire from this thing. And Captain, he yelled to second platoon, take care of that fire that's coming from over there. Joe Torriello, the goof off of the whole thing, ran back, picked a 30 caliber machine gun out of the pedestal mount and the thing, threw the belt of ammo over his shoulder, and rushed out there, firing, you know, just like a John Wayne movie, all by himself. He caused that entire. They fled. They fled. They just disappeared into the forest. That's it. He was recommended for a Silver Star for that. Yeah, but he didn't get it because he'd had, I don't know, have so many court martials that we can't give a Silver Star to a guy that got that many court martials on his record. So, okay, we're going to make this assault. And while we're waiting, this tank back here, they started dropping mortar shells on us. And one of those mortar shells hit one of these tanks. A mortar shell cannot ruin a tank, but I guess makes a terrible noise. That thing hit, and the crew jumped out, got inside the ditch, and another shell came and killed them, just like that. And I'm crouched here, and it all happened just about that fast. All right, they made their assault, and the Germans were waiting. In the next 5 minutes, we lost a lot of guys out there in that open space. They had machine guns waiting this thing, and even before that though, we'd been up and down the railroad track. He's getting, second platoon was over here, first was here, and so forth. Off towards that wooded area to the right. Ebby's just walking along, and I'm behind him, maybe 5 paces and a bit to the right. And somebody from that wooded area behind us fired at us, and the bullet went past my left shoulder and hit the dirt and knocked up a little bit of thing. You know, I wasn't supposed to get fire from that direction. The enemy is in this direction, but who's shooting at us from behind? So I stood there transfixed for just a minute, and quick as a wink, Ebbett said, return that fire, you know, and he could have said, you dummy, because, you know, I hesitated a moment. Well, it turned around, and there were only a few places where that guy could have been.
So I put bullets in him, like this. I don't know. They hit. Nobody. He did. Either I scared him enough, he didn't want to try it again, or I killed him. I don't know which.
He was trying to pick me off too.
Oh, did he shoot at you too?
And I had the SCR, whatever it was, 300.
SCR 300. Yes, it was.
And I was in effect tracking against you and Ebbage. And I had the same experience, where there was a plink. I thought, uh-oh, somebody's firing from behind.
From behind.
I hit the dirt, that big old heavy thing in back of me. I thought, I'll roll this just a little bit, get a little lead battery between me and the deal, sniper. And I figured, well, he's probably going to get excited and he'll pull it to the right. And sure enough, he pulled it to the right and he hit about this far in front of my face. I thought, okay, wait a minute. And he has to do the bolt action routine, and he'll pick up another target if he thinks he got me first. And sure enough, he never returned any additional fire. So by playing dead for about 5 seconds was enough to get him distracted to pick some other, better target.
Maybe it was me who shot him.
So we both had that.
Yeah.
And I told you about that stone station house. It wasn't very big. Captain Ebbage and I got up and we huddled behind this thing. And the wounded that could do so when they got hit would come back. And I remember one of my friends, when he came back, the whole side of his head was just streaming blood. And I thought, oh, good night, because they shot his brains out. Now what had happened is the bullet had hit his helmet just above the rim and gone through it and skinned him here, hit the inside of the helmet but didn't pierce it this time, ricocheted off and skinned him again. So he had this and this. Superficial wound, but he didn't want badly hit. He was streaming blood. But he came to me and I looked at it and saw what it was. Then the next guy came up though, had taken 3 bullets, machine bullets in his thing. The attack is going forward. It's time for Ebbage to run with it. They're already out there. They've reached the first buildings up here, so he's going to go too. He said, okay, Wood, now I'm going to run and hit that low place there. I'm going to take a breath there, and when I jump and run, you follow. He gave me specific instructions how to do this. All right, he goes. I waited a couple minutes, and then I looked around this thing, and I guessed some German machine gunner back there said, I want to get the next guy. Comes around the corner of that building. So when I looked around, right at my feet, it turned off the ground. A whole burst of machine gun fire. Oh, I jumped back. Whew. What are you going to do? You're under orders. You're going to do it. What you were told to do. So I peered out around the corner again. And the guy that had shot the first time realized he fired low. So he raised it just right up at face level. Bang, 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 bang. But it all hit the stones here, and stone chips and bullets went right past my face. I decided that if I look around that building again, I'm going to be on a dead run. And I was. And no fire came, and I know what happened. Somebody had spotted him, or at least where he was, and had killed him. So that's the end of him.
A runner is a dangerous assignment. Oh, good night.
You're exposed almost all the time.
That's the second Hurlesheim. I was runner that day. After you got things launched across the railroad tracks, the attack went across the thing and it kind of divided. And there is, over on the right-hand side of that road that angled across there, was a green stucco house that had a raised garden, with a curbing about this high. And Ebbage went to that house first, and there were about 30 guys clustered up against this thing. They're keeping this house between them and the main part of the town, where those machine gunners were. But the other part had gone off over here to the left of the first house over here. One tank had stayed on the road and came down and was stopped. So he was about halfway between those of us over here at the greenhouse and the guys over here behind this great big thing over here. The whole company was either here or here. All right. I flopped myself down against the curb, which is about this high, and I thought, this is a good place. I can stay here for the rest of the war. They can't shoot me here.
They can't find me.
They can't find me. I'm safe. This is a good, it's surprising how comfortable you can be flat on your tummy up against a curb. You're safe. Even shell bursts aren't going to get you. All right? Can't. And then Ebbage called wood. So I get up and I go around there. He says, go across the road and tell Sergeant Hall to go make an attack across the road to that big barn that's right there, because there's a machine gunner in there and we can't move from this spot until he neutralizes it. I looked at Ebbage and I thought, you're arguing me to my death. You're all huddled here behind this house because you're afraid of that machine gunner down there. And I'm supposed to run out there in front of it. And all the guys are looking at you, you know. Okay, Wood, go. So I grabbed my rifle and I ran. And I planned to run behind this tank. Maybe pause there before I ran again. Evidently the guy in that tank was watching this whole thing. Because the instant I broke cover and started to run, boy, that tank put on a display. They fired their cannon, and the machine gun began to fire. You know, he put on a great display. As long as I was running, he did that. And nobody shot him. And I'm supposing he saw me break and run. I don't know. At any rate, I got off over there to Sergeant Hall with no problem at all. I flopped down, I gave my message to him, and they were preparing to do just that. Then, the Panzerfaust, somebody was from further down inside the town was firing those things up in the air and letting them come down like this. They're going to try to get us, let it fall right near the house. Well, they couldn't really do that because, you know, there's some trajectory there. But the things would land in the field just off out. Terrific explosion when they went off. And then they did launch across the...
Well, I ended up in that first house along the road.
To the right?
To the right.
I remember that house.
And that's where I stopped. At that time, I guess Curry had been wounded out there in the woods. And Sergeant Vance became our platoon sergeant. I think that's where Curry was killed. And Vance had already hit the bottle, and he was half tanked. And he fires his weapon off, and we're about, I guess the rest of my squad was in. And, you know, one time in the war, you wondered, would it be well to shoot this guy, you know, just so he doesn't kill the rest of us?
Yeah.
He was really more dangerous to us than the enemy outside. So we all kept a very close eye on what he was doing and how he did it. After that, I jumped and went to the big house up, well, to the attic and the house across the street. The tile were blown off of it. And I spotted some activity out, you know, half a mile or so forward. So I radioed back in for, literally for artillery barrage. Never done that before. Didn't know how to do that. Just describe, here's what's going on. You got activity around such and so wooded area on this azimuth from where I was located. Fire a few shots, which they did. And
did they?
All of a sudden, whatever was up there disappeared.
They just took us, put it to a reserve position. And we were there for about 5 days while they refitted, sent us replacements over. And the old timers of us, they let us have passes back to Nancy. And I got one of them. And so the deal was they would take you early in the morning to the city, and it's just overwhelmed by American troops. And there wasn't anything you could buy. The only thing you could do is go down to the Red Cross building where they'd taken over a building. You could buy yourself some donuts and coffee, and that was it. Oh, they did have an opera house, though, in Nancy. Boy, it is one of the best preserved of the medieval towns. Okay, about nightfall, I thought I'll just go get on the bus and go back out to the troops. But as I was walking down the street, here's Joe Torriello. I don't know how he did it, but he could always figure out if I'm going to be AWOL, I'm going to be just AWOL when we're not in combat. He said, "Do you have anything to eat today?" I said, "Coffee and donuts." He said, "Would you like a real meal?" Yeah, and so I said, "Yeah, like you could provide one." And he said, "I can." And so he said, "Follow me." The American Army had taken over one of their hospitals. And he said, "Just stand in this line." So we got in line. And this is where they fed the walking wounded. All right, so we got up there, and here's the biggest, ugliest master sergeant. And he's watching the people come by. And I thought, uh-oh, I'm obviously not a patient. And Joe certainly isn't. We're in trouble. I said, "Hey, let's get out of here while we can." He said, no, just stay in line. We get up to the master sergeant. And Joe Torriello says to the sergeant, "Sarge, what do you think? My buddy gets a pass, and what is the first thing he does? He comes to look up his wounded buddies. Now, you're not going to deny him a dinner, are you?" And the sergeant said, "No, okay, go ahead." Neither one of us were supposed to get dinners there. But it was a good meal. They had ice cream. I hadn't seen ice cream in months. Now it's sun's down. Armed guard on the gate. Got to have a pass to get out. I had a pass. So I said, "Okay, Joe, I'll see you." He said, "No, I'm going out of town." So we walk up, and the guard's got a loaded gun, and I show him my pass. And Joe follows me out, and the guard said, "Hey, you." And Joe turned around, and he said, "Hey, you know me." And the guard says, "I don't know." He said, "Well, shoot me then." I've got a picture of the squad hanging on my wall at home. It was taken right when we were at the front. And we're all up to date. We've got the latest kind of gear. Everybody except Joe Torriello. And the reason Joe Torriello isn't equipped right is because the day the supply truck came up with all the new equipment, Joe was AWOL. So there he is in this picture, and he's still got, canvas leggings and overshoes, and his clothes is unbuttoned, and he's ratty looking because he wasn't there the day the good stuff came. Joe, there was a mistake somehow or another. They screwed up, and he didn't get a Purple Heart. We're about to go out on this patrol, and this recent replacement was fiddling with this grease gun, and he tripped off the shot and caught Joe right there. And so he's just standing there with the blood drilling down his leg. He said, "Will somebody go get my pack?" And none of us moved. We just stood there watching him bleed. And he said, "Think of it. Here I am, twice wounded, and I won't get a Purple Heart for this either because it wasn't due to enemy action." So finally he just got a little stomach off and got his pack himself and disappeared looking for an ambulance. And that was the end of Joe Torriello. He had so many fines and summary court-martials that if he paid all of them, he'd be paying the Army to fight the war. But the Army had,
The Army didn't have
that was it. He was. And as soon as it got dark, we stopped fighting and we set up our defense. And then you had to maintain that defense all night long, which meant you got your turn at outpost duty. Joe would be absent. He's up in the barn loft there. One time, he was supposed to relieve me. I knew where he was. And
he didn't come down, and 30 minutes later, I just left my post and I yelled up there. I said, Joe, if you don't come down from there and take over, I'm going to shoot right up through these floorboards. He came down.
Oh, by the way, that second Battle of Hersheim that I talked about, turns out that we were under French Army command that day. And the French decided to strike a special medal. And all of us that were in our division. And they got their records mixed up, and I got 2 of them. The Germans kept trying to make penetrations into this area. And we had to really use smoke and mirrors to convince him there were more troops there than really were. We roared through the night, and we raced along this road this way, and then we turned around and we went back over here. And the Germans were shooting at us, but it's long range. And the 88s are screaming in, but they're such extreme range that they're not hitting anything. We are in the French Army line area. Their line was pierced. They formed a second line. They didn't have a third line, we were it. And the deal was, they led me up to a foxhole and I relieved the guy there, and then 25, 30 yards was another foxhole. We were really thinly scattered. And I had a machine gun. If the Germans break through, they'll come on this road over here to your left. And I looked at the line and to the sergeant and I said, you know, if they're able to do that, we're pretty thinly scattered here. And he told me, he said, all we're here to do is to hold them up a while. All right. The Germans did not pierce the second line of the French. When I was relieved of duty in the foxhole, I came back to this crossroads. There were some French troops there, French legionnaires. And they built a bonfire and they're warming themselves, so I went up to one of them and I'm warming myself. And I thought I knew a little French by now, so I said something to him. And the guy turned to me and he said, "Don't talk that frog talk to me." And I'm talking to a French legionnaire, you know. The guy was from Detroit. He had been on a merchant marine ship and he had shipped to Morocco or someplace. He jumped ship and joined the French Foreign Legion. And then after he told me that, he said I was crazy. All right. So after the Battle of the Bulge, Patton was up here and he said, "Hey, and if you would give me one other armored division, I can punch straight through to the right." This is the Palatinate area of Germany. Eisner gave Patton, he gave him us. He got Alsace-Lorraine here, the major town down here. Well, Colmar was one of them, and Strasbourg was the other, and Mulhouse was the third. There are only 3 major towns right up and down that area. And this whole pocket here, about 100 square miles, had been occupied by the Germans until after the Battle of the Bulge. And so after the Battle of the Bulge is over, Eisenhower's first priority was collapse that thing. So that's why we fought that second Battle of Hersheim. And the next day after we fought that thing, yeah, we got in and we pinched it off. The road that we came down is the one that we went down to meet up with the French Moroccan troops and trapped all those Germans there up against the Vosges Mountains. Simples. Now those guys, they knew how to celebrate. Boy, when we met them, they were drunk. And I thought, how in the world the French officers make an organized thing out of these guys? But it was kind of joyful. They knew it, and they were already well celebrated. All right, this happened on April the 1st. Our lieutenant that had been with us in the States had been killed at Hersheim number 2. So we had this new lieutenant. Well, this lieutenant would have been a long time in grade. So he had reported to our company commander